The Blue Jackets have a ton of great defensive prospects in the pipeline. Could they add another one with a defenseman out of the University of Denver? We're going to talk about that on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Forster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Before we get things started, I also want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, because right now new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. We're doing another prospect episode today because there are just so many good prospects in this draft that I couldn't decide which ones to do. So, hey, we're going to do them all. Not all of them. That would be silly. But I've got Hadi, one half of Locked On NHL Prospects back, and we're going to be talking about Zeev Buium, who is a very, very fun defenseman out of the University of Denver. He could potentially be the next Cale Makar, which again is a little bit melodramatic, but not melodramatic. So I'm just going to turn it over to past me and past Hadi as we talk all about Buium.
The Blue Jackets have a lot of good defensemen waiting in the ranks right now, but could they add one more? And I think, yeah, possibly. And this is a guy that Hadi's smiling already because he loves this guy. And I always love to talk about players that individual scouts really, really love. Because it's so much fun. Like I talked to Sam McGilligan about Gavin Brindley last year, and we talked for like 45 minutes about him. Yeah. So I don't know that we can do 45 minutes on Zeev Buium, but I've got Hadi Kalakeche, one half of Locked On NHL Prospects here. What exactly do you love about this player so much?
How long do you have?
I mean, according to the network, like 24 minutes. So
cool. I'll try not to go that far, but listen, I mean, this is a player who I've been watching him since last year when he was with the NTDP, and the main thing that stood out for me in the NTDP last year was actually his defensive game. Like his skating defensively is fantastic. The way he closes gaps early and like defends like proactively and aggressively was something I noticed immediately by watching him in the NTDP. But this year with Denver, he was just like, screw defense. I'm just going to start just going all in on every offensive chance. And you start hearing like the play-by-play announcers being like, if there's anyone I want with the puck in the last minute of a game, with the game on the line, and you need a goal, I want it to be Zeev Buium. And I'm like, this is a draft eligible defenseman. Like, what are we doing? This is an NCAA program we're talking about. Like, it's just, it makes no sense on any level how good he's been this year. I mean, you look at the point totals, it's like historic production. First of all, defensemen are very rarely in the NCAA in their draft year. Like, by memory, the most recent ones, obviously, like Luke Hughes, Owen Power. Outside of that, I can't name you many. And he's got 32 points in 22 games. Like, this is the level of production that, like, Lane Hudson did last year as a draft +1 player, so a year older than Buium, and that was historical production. Like that, the last time someone had put up that many points, I think, was Brian Leach, like 30 years ago. And now Zeev Buium's doing it as a player who's a year younger, and an NCAA that's getting increasingly more difficult, and a division that's really difficult. And for a program where like he's not the only defenseman on that program. Like his brothers there, they have like a bunch of other defensemen that are like NHL draftees, and he's outplaying them, he's outproducing them, and he's getting ice time over these guys as a freshman. Like you never see this. This is unique stuff. So yeah, I mean that's the logistics of it. But like on the puck, I feel like Zeev Buium half the time is covered in butter. Like he's just so wriggly. Like he can just sneak through the smallest crevices and defensive pressure, like between two players, like no one I've ever seen. His hockey sense is off the charts. He reads plays proactively with a lot of anticipation, but he's not just kind of trying to 4D chess the hockey game. Like he's making simple plays when he needs to and making complex reads when he needs to. that toggle is really on point. His skating's fantastic. His defensive game, like we haven't seen much of it this year, but I know it's good. He just hasn't been focusing on it. On the puck, his shot's ridiculous. His playmaking's ridiculous. His hands are ridiculous. Like there's so much to love with Buium. And yeah, just there's a reason he's in my top 5. He's a fantastic player.
Do the Blue Jackets need another top 5 or top 6 defensive pick? Because, well, maybe not top 6 specifically, because I'm looking at like who they have at the minute, and like David Jiricek is kind of having a bit of a rough rookie season through no fault of his own, I don't think, but they've got Denton Matejchuk in the wings. They've got Stanislav Svozil, who I'm really high on still. Does adding Zeev Buium to that pool make it a more crowded, or does it just add to an already great pool, if that makes sense?
The latter. I think that, first of all, I don't think anyone in the NHL would say no to 2 Denton Matejchuks. But also there's the fact that I think there's a chance Buium becomes the best player of the players you just mentioned. Like overall, in terms of overall impact. David Jiricek, I think, is still raw and needs like a good 2-3 years before we see even the start of the real David Jiricek. Denton Matejchuk's kind of approaching the AHL, but like there's still a lot of question marks there. He's become a more complete player for sure. But just as much as I like Denton Matejchuk's offense, as much as I like David Jiricek's raw physical game and his shot, Zeev Buium combines his skills like no one else in this pipeline. And for me, he's the second best defenseman in this draft. But like by a hair, he's right behind Zane Parekh. So I think that if you're looking for a left-handed D, someone who you can pair with David Jiricek long-term and make one of the best pairings in the NHL in 5, 6, 7 years, Zeev Buium's your guy. I just don't know if that's a direction that the Blue Jackets are going to take, because they'll see Denton Matejchuk and be like, we have a similar skill set. We might want to add something different. I wouldn't blame them for going for a two-way forward. I wouldn't blame them for going for like Sam Dickinson on defense, who's a lot more defensive-minded, a lot more responsible, and a lot more physical than Zeev Buium is. But Zeev Buium's upside is sky high if you can develop him properly. Like there's so much you can hit on in his game, and the production alone puts him in like historic conversation. Like I said, Brian Leach, Lane Hudson, like Luke Hughes, Quinn Hughes. Like so far, he's been outproducing them all. So like it's absurd levels of production from Buium.
Yeah, if we get, like you said, if we get another Denton Matejchuk out of this, it seems okay. But if he turns into a taller Quinn Hughes, I also would not be. I don't think anyone would be mad about that.
Yeah.
Based on the season that he's having.
In a minute, we're going to talk more about Zeev Buium, but first, I've got to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll find exactly what you're looking for every single time. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fix your ride every time, or you get your money back. With eBay Motors, you are going to burn rubber, not cash. They've got all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to US customers.
In terms of Buium, what do you see his development path as? Is he go back to Denver for another year and then make the jump, spend some time in the AHL? Is he a little bit more complete than that? Like, what do you see as the best kind of path for Buium?
Yeah, so if I compare him, for example, to Lane Hudson went back on his draft +1 and then went back again for his draft +2, right? So this is his draft +2 right now. And at the end of the season, there's already talks of him signing and joining the NHL. So I think that's the worst case scenario with Buium, because Buium is more complete than Hudson. There are less tweaks required. There are less clear issues of weakness in his game than Lane Hudson. Lane Hudson has clear development objectives. Buium is more about rounding out his skill set, making himself a more complete player, learning to play under physical pressure, learning to outmuscle players, that kind of stuff. I feel like if you give him another year with Denver, and then you kind of see where you're at in the spring, like around March, April, when the NCAA season's done, and you still have a couple NHL games, and you feel like he's hit your objectives, sign him and join him in. Worst case scenario, send him back for a couple years. But I'd say maximum by year 3, Buium's a full-time NHLer. Like there's enough quality there that I wouldn't be worried at all on that side. And I mean, the points speak for themselves right now. And like I said, it's not like he's just like a lone star on that back end. Like he's had to fight for a spot versus his brother and like other really highly drafted NHL draftees in terms of defensemen. And yeah, there's a reason that he has 32 points in 22 games. It's because he's on the first power play, playing first pair minutes almost. Like, yeah, it's astounding what he's been doing. So yeah, I'd say maximum by year 3, Buium's an NHLer.
Yeah, I feel like and we talked about this, but basically every time that we talk about defensive prospect is they take longer to finish baking than forwards. So I think, you look at, if Owen Power goes back for a year, then Buium should probably also go back for a year, and I don't think it'll hurt his development. I know a lot of people, they get really excited, and myself included. I'm not kind of discounting myself from this. They get really excited by really, really good prospect, and especially if your team is struggling and your team is bad, like the Blue Jackets are right now. There is this kind of urge to let's just put all of the prospects on the team and hit go. But I think Buium's kind of profile to me feels like a player that probably wouldn't struggle if he was in the NHL next season. But I also think he's a guy that, I feel like you risk ruining development if you put them into the NHL too early. More so with defensemen than any other skater group.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing with defensemen is their confidence, right? Like you want them being aggressive on pucks, and if they're getting caught flat-footed on almost every play because they've never faced the level of speed and awareness that there is in the NHL for the first time, like it's a difficult position to be in. I feel like you want your players. I mean, the other major thing in the NHL is just you don't have space, you don't have time. You have to play almost absent-mindedly so that you can focus your brain power on other things like positioning yourself well and, choosing the right first pass and that kind of thing. Like the rest of your game needs to come naturally. Like there's a big step up. And like a lot of people underestimate the step up between like the NCAA and the NHL. It's massive. I know NCAA players are up to like 24 years old, but it's not the same game at all. So like, yeah, I don't think it's, this isn't NHL 24. You can't just like play anyone. Like you will. There's a possibility if you play all prospects, no matter how good your prospects are, that you lose 82 games. Like it's that big of a step up. So I think that the smart thing, especially, I mean, you'll see it a lot with the smallest players and the biggest players. Both those categories take a lot longer to make the NHL full time than players that are between like 5'11" and 6'2". Like those players usually, I mean, they're kind of in the middle of the pack, so they can transition kind of seamlessly. But when you're big, like I mentioned before in our previous episode, like if you're 6'4", 220 pounds at 18 years old, you're out muscling everyone. You're not learning how to play. You're not learning how to compensate for your lack of size or speed or strength because you have all that already. So you take longer to kind of adapt to the level of speed and skill that you've never faced before. And same thing for smaller players. They've learned what to do against like bigger players, sure, but they've done it in a control environment against like guys who are like 6 foot, 6'1" at most. Now they're facing like a 6'5", 250 pound like defenseman. Like it's not the same thing. So both those categories take longer. Buium's right in the middle. I think he's 5'10", 5'11", like something like that. He's listed as 6 foot. He's somewhere around that. Like, but he's right in the middle. Exactly. He's like right in the middle, right? So maybe add some weight. Maybe that might be a thing he might need to work on. Because he will get out muscled in like one-on-one battles. That's still a thing in the NCAA. So it's clearly going to be a thing in the NHL. But like, if he adds the right weight in the right places, adds some core strength, adds some leg strength, learns to kind of hits the gym a bit more frequently, like gets an NHL level nutritionist to work with him, like you can get a 190 pound Zeev Buium, which would be fantastic for him.
In a minute, I'm going to finish up my conversation with Hadi about Zeev Buium. But first, I will tell you about Indeed, because we're all driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate is not to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. They are your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and they've got a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. You can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employees agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. I love to use Indeed. If I'm job hunting, it's the only site I use, so I can only assume that it's just as good if you are trying to hire someone else as if you are looking for a job yourself. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide who use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show are going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed. I've also got to tell you about Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to that IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply, and now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SPIC, is a registered broker-dealer.
Is that kind of his big, I don't want to say criticism, but like his biggest obstacle towards becoming like the best NHL player he can be? Like, is there anything in terms of his on ice game that you think he needs to like his skating or his not his skating obviously, but like something like, is there an on ice piece of his toolkit that you think, okay, he really needs to take this into the next gear to hit his ceiling?
Yeah, I think he's a pretty fluid skater, but his edge work isn't all there yet. Like, he loves to move laterally at the blue line, but doesn't yet have the agility of a Quinn Hughes or like a Cale Makar or that kind of thing. Like, he's still like he'll try to pull off the same moves as those guys, but doesn't have the same tools as those guys. So if you can work on his edge work, make him a bit better in terms of going from full stop to like moving laterally really quickly, I think that'd be a fantastic thing for his game, because like he already has the instincts to pull off the right moves, but his feet just aren't there yet, right? So that would just bolster his upside even further than it already is, and that's what kind of I'm banking on happening as he grows up, is like if he gets with a team that's really good at developing edge work and skating, you can make a fantastic player out of him just with that. Defensively, I mean, you're looking at him right now. I wouldn't say it's a lack of awareness. I would say it's a lack of focus on the defensive side. Like, he's still looking to join the offense as much as he can. He's leaving his D partner to dry on like 2-on-1s, 3-on-1s, that kind of thing. Like, he's trying to get points, right? But I think that's not an issue. And then the obvious issue is the physicality. Like, I don't think he's necessarily a guy who's going to throw big hits, who's going to outmuscle you along the boards, win puck battles, all that. But if you can get that to just an average range, like 185 to 195 in his prime, I think that's more than reasonable. And you're not paying him to throw big hits. You're going to be paying him to just score you points consistently, and that's what he can do. So yeah, I'm not too worried, but I say edge work and weight would be the two things that might need some work, and usually one affects the other. So especially if you gain weight, if it's not the right weight, your edge work's going to suffer, your agility is going to suffer. But if you have the good weight, then your skating gets better, your edge work gets better because you have more leg strength, right? And the opposite is true, where like if you're working on your edge work, suddenly you're activating the right muscles, and you start to add weight in places you didn't know you could, and your weight goes from, I don't know, like 163 to 170 without even really changing any of your gym or nutrition routines, just by like doing the right things. So yeah, there's so much at play here, but I think that those two things, especially if combined in terms of upgrades in this game, like the sky's the limit with Zeev Buium.
Yeah, and it feels like that's a thing that is just going to happen naturally as well. Like you mentioned, he gets an NHL nutritionist, he gets put on an NHL level workout plan. It feels like it's going to take care of itself. You know, it's not something that he has to really kind of put a lot of conscious effort in necessarily. So in terms of like critiques, I guess it's definitely not like it's not a game breaker.
Yeah, but I mean, that's also, I feel like that's giving too much credit to NHL teams because, like, they can mess this up. They can mess this up. We've seen it before. So, like, you never know. But, like, as long as he gets on an NHL team that knows what it's doing with his prospects, I don't think there's any doubt Zeev Buium could very well become, like, the best defenseman out of this draft. Like, and he could be up there with the best in the NHL. Like, he has that much upside and that much intelligence and that much kind of intricacy and wriggliness to his game that he can just he can make it work. Yeah.
Well, maybe he'll make it work on the Blue Jackets. I want to wrap this up with just kind of a fun question. Is there a prospect that you are kind of really high on that is probably not going to go in the first round? Like who's an underrated prospect that you think the Blue Jackets could kind of snag at kind of a Gavin Brindley type level?
You say that,
getting Gavin Brindley at 34th overall is still like the highlight of.
It's so funny.
Highlight of the draft for me.
I love it.
So if we assume that the Blue Jackets are probably going to draft 4th overall, then they'll also draft 36th overall. Yeah. Is there a player that you kind of hasn't had much attention that you're like, hey, the Blue Jackets could sneak in here and grab this guy and make out like bandits?
Luke Misa. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. And I've seen he was like in the 60s on Bob McKenzie's board. So like NHL teams aren't high on him. I have him like well into my top 20. And yeah, he's a center. He plays for the Mississauga Steelheads in the OHL. Really, really pacey. So he reminds me a lot of Gavin Brindley, actually, which is so funny because like you said Gavin Brindley, I was like, oh my goodness, that's Luke Misa.
Oh, hey, there we go. There's the small, speedy forward that we could be obsessed with this year. Love that.
That works his butt off and is really good defensively. Yeah, absolutely. That's Luke Misa. Really pacey, really skilled. If you watched the CHL top prospects game and didn't notice them, you weren't watching. Like he was just darting through. I mean, it's not effective, but it's so fun to watch. But what's really, really effective is his defensive game. Like he's a like one and done defensive player where it's like as soon as he gets involved in a defensive play, it's over. Like his team has a puck. And yeah, just constantly like the thing that really interests me with him, and the same thing that interests me with Gavin Brindley, they both think and skate at the same speed, and that speed is ridiculously high, which is like that combo just works. And I feel like Gavin Brindley is going to be a fantastic player for that, and Luke Misa will be as well. So yeah, I'd say Luke Misa is this year's Gavin Brindley, not just in terms of like a player I like more than consensus is going to slip in the second round or maybe even the third, but just actually in terms of play styles, they're really, really similar.
Yeah, no, I would not be mad about adding another Gavin Brindley into the prospect pool. Maybe I'm biased, but if people want to learn more about prospects, they want to learn more about they want to hear you talk about Zeev Buium for 45 minutes, where can they find you and your work online, Hadi?
Absolutely. So the one-stop shop is right below my face. If you're watching on YouTube, it's Hadi K _scouting. HADI_scouting. It's a one-stop shop. Everything I post, everything I write, everything I do in terms of podcasts all goes there. You can also follow Locked On NHL Prospects wherever you're watching this. Make sure to check us out. We always give some updates about what's going on in the draft, future drafts, past drafts, all that good stuff. And yeah, I also have my personal YouTube channel, Hadi Kalakeche NHL Draft Scouting. I post some videos occasionally. I'll start wrapping up the prospect coverage, just some videos about some draft eligibles. If you kind of want to break down if you want to watch me break down their games in like too much detail, that's where you see it.
Well, can confirm Locked On NHL Prospect is one of my first listens every day. So if Locked On Blue Jackets is your first listen, then Locked On NHL Prospects should probably be your second listen because we have a lot of prospects and they get quite a lot of airtime, which, again, I'm biased, but I do love. Thank you for coming to hang out, Hadi, and we'll definitely have to do a couple more of these as we get closer to the draft.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow, we are going to break down tonight's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, hopefully breaking down a win, but we'll see. I've got my fingers crossed. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. We are also on Sirius XM. You can also catch the game on Sirius XM. The Blue Jackets play tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Catch every goal of the Jackets' hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search Blue Jackets. I've been Jay Forster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Forster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email us at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Hopefully you enjoyed the game tonight, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.